Hello and welcome everyone to How to Market Yourself, your cyber self. This is episode 5 of 8, and we're going to be talking about elevate your brand through thought leadership. So, first off, if this is your first time here, welcome to the show. I am not typically here, but I will quickly introduce myself. I am Jax. I am a cyber diva. I'm a podcaster, dear friends with Jerry, and I love the Simply Cyber community. So I already see some familiar faces out there filling up the chat. So this is going to be a great episode. For everybody that's been here before, welcome back. If you are new here, welcome. This is an amazing community. Introduce yourself in the chat, get to know one another. All right, so we don't have a lot of time because this is a pretty short episode. We've got 30 minutes and we are covering a ton of stuff. So make sure you have a pen and a piece of paper because it's going to be lit today. I'm like actually really excited about this episode. So first things first, though, I want to introduce our guest. So if you have not met her, you are in for a real treat. Today, we have an amazing guest and a world-renowned marketing expert, CEO, Virginia Case. Now, she has over 20 years of experience in this space, serving both in cyber and the tech community. Here's some fun facts about her. She advises business and individuals on strategies and tactics to effectively go to market. That's why her company name, what her company name means, which is Strata, strategy and tactics as one. That's super clever. Love it. Also, friend of the Simply Cyber community. This is her series that she's putting on for the Simply Cyber community. And she is a dog mom to 4 Cavalier King Charles Spaniards. That's a lot of dogs. Not going to lie. I'm like a single cat woman over there. All right, let's do it. Let's get the guests on the show. You guys ready for this? Give her some love. Hello. How are you?
I'm so good. It's so great to see you, Jax. Thanks for having me.
So great to have you, Virginia. I'm excited about this episode because I'm an entrepreneur in this space. I'm really big on doing content, but I haven't actually figured out how to transition the data, the content that I'm putting out there and actually generating revenue, creating that additional revenue stream. So before we jump in, I know last week we talked a little bit about thought leadership, and we're also going to be talking about it today. Can you touch on just telling us what is the difference between last week's episode and this, or 2 weeks ago's episode and this episode?
So the big difference is that we're going to be talking about ourselves as a brand today versus individuals. Lots of people may be in the process of transitioning from one career to another, and they may be rebranding themselves as a cybersecurity person. Some people may be in the process of developing a service or a product or turning themselves into a product. We'll talk about that a lot today. And also, this session should be especially helpful for those who are looking for trying to find some cyber leaders to follow and using those thought leaders as examples for different ways that you can effectively go to market yourself and be able to find those things that will potentially work for you to generate revenue for yourself.
I am all about the revenue talk. Like, how do we make money in this space? I'm super interested in that.
So revenue is important. While it's really fun in the beginning to create content for content's sake, I don't really advocate for that. I try and make sure that every piece of content that's being created has an intention, has a purpose. Revenue is a great reason. So when we're looking at generating revenue, there's a few different ways. And as we look at, I've got 3 different examples for us today. Different ways that some of these thought leaders are generating revenue are through consulting or through public speaking and conferences. There's different rates that people can charge depending on their level of notoriety. Books, that's one of the things that people can do, from writing segments to writing longer content pieces. That also flows into sponsored content. Think about different ways that people might show up on somebody else's blog, for instance. There's advertising when people actually come to a website. There's training and workshops. There's also different paid engagements if you're sitting on a board. And obviously, there's lots of opportunities around online courses. Our favorite Jerry has some of his own courses out there available. And then there's affiliate marketing. And if you're not familiar with that term, it's basically when different people recommend products or services and they get a commission that's basically tracked through a different link that says use the special URL. And then there's endorsements. We know this traditionally is how people are saying you should try X, Y, and Z. There's a lot of requirements around that now. And also, one of the things that we're not going to see here today, but something that is definitely possible, is using your skills for hands-on services. For instance, if you were doing pen testing or vulnerability assessments, that type of thing, you would be able to potentially generate revenue through that, developing it, that initial touch point through that thought leadership, and then being able to sell those services beyond that.
Yeah, I heard about the affiliate marketing. It is a huge thing that you can do, and it's all the rave I see on Instagram. Is everybody is into this affiliate marketing? But how long does it really take before we jump to the next topic? Like, if you're starting something from scratch, what would you typically say it takes for somebody to build something out and actually start seeing that revenue from like affiliate marketing?
So it really depends on kind of like that virality. So sometimes if you're somebody who is an overnight success, you could see that revenue happen pretty quickly. So for instance, if you get a viral meme or if you have something where you're associated with something that's newsworthy, you could see that just kind of clout rise overnight. Otherwise, it could be something that over time, you really just need to keep working at, sort of like search engine optimization. You have to work it over time to build the authority, build the reputation, and then as people start to know about you, then you can start saying, well, this is my number of followers, or this is the number of impressions that I get on different platforms.
I like that. That's awesome. All right, so we're going to be talking about one of my favorite people next. I'm excited about this.
So the first person that we're going to be looking at for top performing influencers, because I promised you guys that I was going to go in and give you some actual people that are out there in the world doing this stuff successfully. And so the best person that I thought to start at like one of those cyber thought leaders that gets out there and is really doing well for himself is Brian Krebs. So if you don't know Brian, you can check him out on LinkedIn. What he shares is industry updates, content from fellow security experts, and stories about different cyber attacks. He's not as active on LinkedIn. He does post almost daily, but all of his content that he posts does go to his website. He reposts, but he's not really a commenter. And if you know from our previous sessions that that's something that I really try to encourage people to do, especially earlier in their careers. And then he's also on Twitter, or shall we say X? Is it too soon? It's probably soon. Well, it's the right time. He has an account, but he doesn't post, as he states inside of his different pinned tweets. So he's kind of grumpy about it, and you can actually see he's got some of those. If you want me, you can actually go find me over on Mastodon. So Mastodon's another place that a lot of cyber people are headed over to. He's actually using Mastodon as a RSS feed. So it's an opportunity for him to kind of get that information out there, but there's really no engagement. People aren't, posting or re-engaging with any of the content there. It's really just that news feed. And then I know we talked about Threads last time. Really no shock that he's not on Threads, but he's not there. So we need to kind of like analyze this, put a bow on it. Here's what we know. He's one of the most successful cybersecurity influencers. He's been at it a long time. He was also a New York Times bestseller, an independent investigative journalist. So when we look at like what are the lessons that we can take away from Brian? Well, original content is what keeps his followers engaged. And all of the content that he has on his website, you can see he's got advertising, he's got a whole bunch of different things that really can get people to engage with him on multiple fronts. Now, you may have noticed that I didn't say YouTube. Mm-hmm. Here's an important point. YouTube isn't for everyone. And if you're not somebody who does a lot of video content, then YouTube may not be the channel for you. For Brian, it's not his in terms of a property that he owns. And as you may remember from last session, the OPP, other people's property, he is actually being shown on a whole bunch of other different channels for other people's content. So he's on YouTube, he just doesn't maintain a YouTube channel. So
interesting.
That is our kind of Brian in a nutshell.
Yeah. Oh, and here's his YouTube. Sorry, folks. I was a little behind the curve, but yeah, there you go. Nothing really on there. Interesting. This must be a credit card. Yeah. Little credit card fraud. Gotta love it. I love him. He's awesome. Great guy.
So the next person that we're going to be looking at is a guy named Graham Cluley. And I like Graham because he's interesting and funny and engaging. He's got about 21,000 LinkedIn followers. He shares candid commentary on recent security incidents, cyber attacks, online privacy, cybercrime, ransomware, lots of different topics on here. There are a few things that I want you to notice as we're looking through these different profiles for Graham. You're going to notice specifically, in comparison with Brian, he's got the same headshot across all of his different channels. And so when we were looking at Brian, what we were seeing was he didn't really need a whole bunch of branding for himself because he's already been the brand, whereas Graham is still coming up in the ranks. When we looked at how much saturation that Brian has made on the internet, we can start seeing that Graham has some like recognition and memorability stuff that he's got working in play. So on Twitter, he's got 112,000 followers. He's very active. On Mastodon, he's got 12,000 followers. He posts approximately weekly. There's still really no action on Mastodon for being able to get those followers to engage. On LinkedIn, he really only posts when he has something to say, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And then he is incredibly active on YouTube. So in terms of like how that is giving him a good return on investment, TBD, because we don't have those details, but he's got about 4,000 followers. He's got over 200 videos. And one of the things that you can see from this is that he's actually got this other podcast and what he's got going on to build his brand. So this is when you can kind of see how the Smashing Security podcast can help him build his brand personally. So as we looked through all these different channels for Graham, you're going to see some of the same banners. You're going to see a lot of the same headshot. You're going to see a lot of the consistency. And that consistency of his headshot, the headers, all of that tells you this is who he is. And when we start looking at his own website, though, we can start seeing that he's more of a jovial kind of person. He's engaging in general. But when we get to his website, for instance, we can start to see that he's kind of buttoned it up a little bit more and that he's a little bit more polished, making sure that people are going, yes, you want to actually pay me the money. Mm-hmm. So we see that sort of build up of, okay, inside of places where we understand we can unbutton our top button, it is that kind of environment where people are on social. They can really kind of let looser. But on those channels where we want to really generate revenue, we need to keep it buttoned up. And so specifically, like you can see on Brian's website, he's using it to monetize his information. And then what we're seeing here too from Graham is that he's looking at different ways to sell his services and for people to engage. So there's a lot of different ways that Graham is kind of going to market, and there's a lot of different things that he's doing successfully. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of gives you that perspective. If you're looking at 100,000 followers or you're looking at 20,000 followers, that's a big jump in terms of how we actually see people engage on social platforms. But it also gives us some perspective into the different places and types of content that people are actually going to share.
I like that. This is great.
I know I'm making you jump around like crazy.
No,
today,
it's good.
Jax.
Yeah,
thank you for being so quick with the clicker.
And let me know, Chad, if I'm like driving you crazy clicking around. I want to make sure that you see everything as she's talking. But no, this is great. Keep it going. I'm on board.
All right, so I think that it's time that we talk about a female in the group. So Shira Rubinoff, I'm not sure if you are familiar with her, but she is also another cybersecurity person out in the world who is sharing research, guidance on data security, online privacy, blockchain, AI. She seems to be on a whole bunch of different topics, and she's on a whole bunch of different platforms. So when we look at her in terms of LinkedIn, she's not there except for to be there. She really very rarely posts. It's about monthly, and when she does, it's content about herself or her career. That's not bad news, by the way. It's okay to have certain channels that really are broadcasting about your career, but there are other places that you want to use to be able to continue to generate interest and help you generate that revenue. On Twitter, she shares content about herself. She retweets things about other people. She's got a pretty good following over there. She isn't on Mastodon, but she is on Threads, and she's on Instagram, and she's on TikTok. So we don't necessarily see this a lot with cybersecurity influencers, but we are starting to see more people kind of take advantage of some of these shorter form content. And so what we know about Shira is that the content she is creating is mainly the content that is going to be done on video. She is really a video entrepreneur with this kind of stuff, and you're not going to see her doing a whole bunch of written content, at least on her social channels. When we look at the kind of more viral platforms, you're going to see a lot more engagement from followers on things like TikTok. She's got over 62,000 followers on TikTok. On YouTube, she's got 162,000 subscribers. So in comparison to the other two people we talked about, she's far more successful in terms of followership and getting a lot of people to engage with her. So what we know, she's a keynote speaker who has really leaned into video and is seeing success. And so it's really great to see all these different ways that she's presenting herself. And if we talk about kind of how she is going out in the world, there are a lot of different ways that you can effectively communicate your brand. So when we looked at Brian, we saw that he didn't really need a lot of brand recognition. We know who he is. He's been around long enough that we know. When we start looking at Graham, Graham's got some of that consistency factor. And you may see this in other places where people will do like a screenshot of their Twitter feed and then put it in LinkedIn or vice versa. And what you'll see from that is they've got the same headshot across all those different places. So for Shira, though, she has played the game here of being in all these different places, and so it would be kind of boring and monotonous if she were to use the same headshot in every single place. She's using similar stuff. She looks like herself, but the thing is that there are multiple ways to own your brand. She's looking at taking her Rubinoff media brand and using that as part of how she's going to be collecting revenue. Whew, that was a lot.
It was a lot.
Is everybody still with us?
Yeah.
It's that New Yorker in me that gets going really fast and then just wants to give you all the details and all the stuff.
Yeah. How are we looking? Any questions? I don't see anybody. I think Jerry was in the chat. Maybe I see some people saying hi, Jerry. So hi, Jerry.
So Christopher, your question about, do you need more flashiness for TikTok though? Great question. One of the things that I recommend around TikTok, if you're going to do it, is become really knowledgeable around what it takes to start using some of these creative mediums. Whether that's being able to use the animations that are provided, or if you're getting good quality content of yourself, pay attention to what other people are doing, analyze it, deconstruct it, figure out what are the things that they're using in terms of accelerators. And there's accelerators inside of every platform. And like I've talked about in the past, there's a lot of different ways that you can use tools already in existence that are really meant for mobile mediums. Like Canva has a whole bunch of different templates that you can use just for social. So don't be afraid to lean into that stuff, especially in the beginning. And if you struggle in the beginning being like, Virginia, I am just not a creative person, I don't want to do this, it's okay. You will start getting better at it the more you practice. And if you really don't want to practice, you can find a friend, look for somebody where you can barter skills and figure out something that you can do to reciprocate, and maybe they can help you and you can help them.
I love that. We have a couple more questions if you have a moment. I think we do. All right. So the next one here by Ben Howard. What would you do if you don't have a following, but people who do are now recognizing you by your old headshots?
Ooh, it's like those people when you're driving down the street and you see like the realtor signs and you meet them and they're nothing like that person in general. I think that doing a phased approach of starting to get more of your face in front of other different mediums is a really great way to start. So when you're starting to share content inside of your different feeds, selfies, it's a great way to start pivoting and getting into that. And also you can do some stuff where you play with an avatar, you can do some other stuff which kind of rebrands you into that world. I worked with a company once where everybody had an avatar that was some type of meme. And so when you actually met them in person, you had no idea who they were. And then they'd introduce themselves and you go, you're George, it's so nice to meet you. But it's helpful for people to have that continuation of like, hey, before you were this character and now you're this character. Just getting people to see that and making sure that saturation factor works in your favor.
I love that. Couple more questions on here. So we have another one from Farms. I think that's, Farms. So how do you launch your own personal brand? Oof.
So start where you're comfortable. That is really the biggest thing. Start where you're comfortable. So if that is creative, great. Start some stuff that you can create that can go into specific channels that you know they already have an audience. So LinkedIn's a great place. Mastodon, probably not right now. What you want to be also doing is thinking about what your own personal skills and talents are. So if you're somebody who is really great in a recorded situation, maybe doing recorded podcasts where somebody can do post-production for you, even if it's yourself, maybe that's the place for you. If you're somebody who really gets nervous on film, maybe writing is the vehicle that is going to be best for you, and you can start doing LinkedIn articles, you can start a blog. Starting a website is also another option for you. So a lot of different platforms out there nowadays make it pretty simple with drag and drop capabilities for you to be able to build that brand for yourself. But what I would say is start where you're comfortable and then start moving outside of that comfort zone into things that you may not know that you could be good at, or that you need to really work that muscle to be stronger at. that. But really try and use the platforms already in existence rather than sending yourself down the path of I need to have a website. A website's the one
Yeah.
thing that I absolutely have to have. Usually that is not the answer. What the answer is use the platforms already in existence, use the different values that they have for the domain authority on those websites that are going to drive people to you and your brand, build that company page on LinkedIn if you are building a company, and look for ways to drive people to those different properties.
I love that. Awesome. We still have time for a couple more questions. They're
Yeah,
coming
no
in.
problem.
All right, perfect. So we've got from Ricardo, opinion on socials having mixed content, say cybersecurity, and then maybe they're a food critic, but maybe they don't want to create two separate socials and they just kind of want to have one where they put both of the content out. What would you say?
So I love this question because it is something that I struggle with personally. I have a lot of different passions. And so I'll just give you two examples. My world that I do every single day is marketing, but I also really care about volunteer work. And so my volunteer work has absolutely nothing to do with marketing, but I like talking about it. So I try to find different ways to link those different content pieces together. And even if it's just this is who I am and the robust nature of my world. Now, if you're selling two different products, you're really going to have to build out those two different properties. And there's going to be some work that really needs to be done to bring up the new property at the same level as potentially the mixed audience before. But niching down and helping people find the content that's most relevant to them is what's going to keep followers instead of getting them to unfollow.
I love that approach of like just having it tied in because I have the Army Reserve side and I am doing stuff in the veteran space, but I also have cybersecurity. And how I've gone about it is like the military side is just more of this is me, my personal side. This is what I do outside of being just a cybersecurity person. And it kind of resonates with what you were saying. So I'm going to stay on that approach.
I
I
like
like
it.
it.
Go for it.
Yes. All right. So Jerry dropped a Q in here. Do you like the idea of a brand as a person, such as Jerry Ogier, or as an entity, as like Simply Cyber, for example? Are there pros or cons of either approach?
So I think about this in terms of music, and that may be a funny way of thinking it, but whenever anybody goes out into the marketplace as a new musician, they typically are a self-branded first album. Why is that? Because they're trying to get people to recognize their name. Now, if they're a band, the band is typically like got a little flexibility, but again, it's based off of that name and brand recognition. So for me, when I first started out my career, I was selling a company, Stratac. Now I'm selling me as a consultant. And so Stratac is still part of me, but as a consultant, that is my primary focus. So as you're looking at like how you want to brand yourself versus an entity, make sure that you're still building yourself, even if you are building an entity. And look at those different ways that you can get away with having more generic content potentially for yourself and more specific content around your company. And that's where you're going to help drive that revenue in the different areas.
God, that's so good. And that really back to like, that's what I deal with having Outpost Gray and then Jax and being able to really tie those together. I love that idea. Focus on you and your brand will follow in kind of a way. So I have a few more coming up. Do you feel, I think this is one right here, Mind Capsule Media. When do you feel you are experienced enough before building your brand around it and speak on it?
Oh, you're never ready. Just start.
Agree.
It's just a reality. Get out there before you're comfortable because if you're comfortable, it's too late. And that's something that I try and take my own advice on. I'll tell you, doing this entire Simply Cyber like episode series is something that really is something that makes me uncomfortable, transparently, because I am more of the recorded person. I am more of a script person. I am more the person who wants to have that ability to say, "Oh, can we do that one more time? Can we just cut that? Just pretend I didn't say that." And as a perfectionist, this kind of stuff makes me crazy. But it's building that muscle. It's being able to get better at these things so that you can continue to build your own personal brand. So don't wait till you're ready. Get out there, do it. And remember that not everybody's going to love your content. Not everybody's going to love you. And that's okay. You will find your audience. You will find your group. Just keep going. If you don't keep going, you'll never find them.
100% agree. All right, I say one more and then we'll jump into the rest of the content that we have for everyone. So Ben, I think this is a great question, Ben. When creating your brand, say he does tutorial videos or podcasts, what is the best way to keep it organized for the followers? Some people do episodes. What's your thoughts on this?
So I like thematic organization, and that really helps people to be able to see, like, if I care about this theme, this is all the different stuff that can bring me along that journey. Episode numbers are helpful in some ways, but in terms of like being able to be focused on the content itself, I find thematic groupings, like for instance on YouTube, as an example, different playlists. And as you're looking at those different playlists, think about what that person wants to watch next. What thematic elements are going to be interesting to that different persona that may be interested in what's it take to become a SOC analyst. Versus like I'm doing a tutorial and I'm going to be jumping around and I'm going to be focused on keywords. There's a bunch of different ways that you can do that. Seldom, like inside of that YouTube channel, is somebody going to be able to sit and listen to an entire cadence of a playlist, especially if somebody's been doing it for a long time. But podcasts, that's a great way for people to kind of do episodic numbering and whatnot. But even in terms of like how Jerry's doing it is a great example for everybody here. There's a lot of different mediums that you can go down and a lot of different branding that you can do so that when you do start doing different content, it doesn't have to be like, oh man, I forgot, was that episode 2 or episode 3? And then, for instance, just the difference between last episode and this episode that we're doing inside of this series. We were talking about thought leadership last time. We're talking about thought leadership this time. What's the difference? But hopefully both of these episodes are going to be helpful to people who are building themselves up and potentially their brands.
I love it. Dropping all of the knowledge bombs. All right. I know we're coming up on time, and I know we've got a couple more things that we would like to cover before we wrap up.
So a few things that I want you guys to take away. So I promised you strategies and tips for establishing yourself. So here's the first one. Pick the channel that works for you and your style. Not every channel or creative medium is for everyone, and you shouldn't shove yourself out into something that you're not comfortable with first thing out of the gate, because the chances are that you're going to get too uncomfortable and you're not going to do it. You don't want to throw in the towel before you've even begun. 2, original content is so important. It's what makes you stand out. And what we see from those 3 different individuals that we looked at is that they were creating original content. And if, like, for instance, with Shira, she was reposting other people's content and commenting and retweeting and that type of thing, that's okay too. Curating content, as I call it, is a different way of being able to share information out in the world with your opinion attached to it. An original can be your own life experiences. Lean into the things that you're learning or that you're knowing about your industry or that you're discovering about your industry. These are all some really great ways for you to have something original to say. You're not going to be a leader of the most knowledgeable things. Brian Krebs kind of already got out there before all the rest of us. So figure out for you what you want to lead on, what topics that you feel are good, and you can even use things like LinkedIn's news to be able to jump on the train of like, hey, this is what's interesting and happening in the news today that's relevant to the people I care about. I'm going to talk about this and become educated about those things. And going back to the question about if you're relatively unknown, you have 2 ways to win the memorability game. One is consistency, like we saw with Graham, being able to see those different headshots and the different banners across different channels, and people are able to see that and recognize it. The other is the volume or saturation game, which we saw with Shira. So those are the 2 ways to really help yourself get out there and become memorable and sticky in people's minds. And then going back to the last episode, I want to touch on something that we didn't have a lot of time to go through, and I've drawn up a diagram to help you kind of visualize what I'm talking about when I talk about hub and spoke content or constellation content. So constellation content to me is really about being able to figure out how to create content so that it doesn't feel like you're in all these different worlds. And this really fits into what we were talking about here as well. So constellation, it's obviously a group of stars or celestial bodies that form a recognizable pattern. So you might think of Orion's belt or Centaurus. There's that recognizable pattern. And as you develop content, you should be looking for a recognizable pattern as well. You want things that are going to be interconnected and form that cohesive, recognizable pattern or theme. And so this is an example of how my world constellation works. So as you can see, kind of like the brighter stars in this are entrepreneurship, marketing, and business strategy. These are 3 core areas in terms of the content that I talk about and that I care about. And one of the things that I promised you as well in this episode was talking about vulnerability. The things that you see over here inside of that red color are the things that are more personal to me, things that are successes and failures. That's a personal story. Also, lessons learned. That can be good lessons learned, bad lessons learned. They're just lessons learned. Those are the stories. Those are the original pieces of content. And what it's like on a daily basis. Some days it's riding the struggle bus. Some days it's really riding high. There's a lot of different ways that you can talk about entrepreneurship. But entrepreneurship can lead itself into innovation. And innovation talks about funding and business idea generation and market and research analysis, which leads into marketing, which is one of my other core areas. And so if we start looking at all these different ways that the content moves and is connected to one another, suddenly it doesn't seem so scattered. Now I have a strategy of like, this fits under my marketing constellation, this fits under my business constellation, and you can build these out in terms of like what fits for you. But if I'm starting to talk about being a florist versus being a neurosurgeon, it may not be the easiest thing for me to overlap. So I encourage you to think about what are those bright stars for you, pick out between 3 and 5, and then see those little subtopics for yourself that are going to help you develop the content around those different areas of interest.
I love it. This is awesome.
Jax, that's what I got for everybody today.
I know, like we have so much to cover, but I think we did an awesome job. So before we wrap up, I just want to remind everybody, don't forget to book 15 minutes with Virginia. And Virginia, how can they do that?
So I like to volunteer my time with people who are still earlier in their careers and people who are looking to start a fresh start inside of cybersecurity. And so you can get time with me. There's absolutely no obligation. This is truly something that I just enjoy doing. So if you go to Calendly, this is a special link that you can use. It gets 15 minutes with me. I want to know about you. And there's a little form in there that'll give me a little bit about you so that we can have a conversation about different things that you're interested in. And you can use this to ask me questions about what you have specifically as a burning topic in your mind, or it can even be a get to know you. So whatever it is, please use the link. I'm eager to meet everybody, and I hope that you're finding this series helpful, and I hope that you choose to connect with me on LinkedIn. Make sure to follow.
Oh my gosh. And I have so many questions, but I know we're at time. We've got to wrap it up. But just a reminder for everyone, come back in 2 weeks. We've got another show, another episode. It's going to be episode 6. I don't remember the name of it.
That's all right. We're going to be a Black Hat. And so super excited. Jerry and I are going, Jax, I'm missing you terribly.
No, I'm missing it. Oh, but I made a conscious decision to stay back this year. So I will be there next year and you guys are going to crush it. Cannot wait to see that one live on location. Oof. It's going to be spicy. All right, Virginia. Thanks again. Bye, everyone.
See you guys.
Everybody, I hope you enjoyed that content. Keep the cybersecurity train going by connecting with the other Simply Cyber community resources. We have the Discord server that's lively and always keeps the conversation going. You can connect with me directly on LinkedIn. And also every single weekday morning on the Simply Cyber channel, we're doing live daily cyber threat briefings, 8 a.m. Eastern time, as well as Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We're doing live stream interviews with industry experts, and we produce videos that we push out every Wednesday morning. I'm Jerry from Simply Cyber. I hope you enjoyed the content.